When I picked up the phone to ask my daughter Sarah when her wedding would be, she said to me in a chilling voice, "Oh, we already got married. We only invited special and important people." Eleanor White was 69 years old, and that morning she was about to face the most painful truth of her life. In her hand was a wedding invitation, her daughter Sarah's invitation. 3 days earlier, her neighbor had given her the envelope, saying it had been mistakenly delivered to their mailbox. When Eleanor opened the envelope, her heart began to pound. The wedding had taken place the day before. Sarah had gotten married, and Eleanor hadn't even received a single phone call. Eleanor sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the invitation. Golden embossed letters, an elegant design, it was obvious that it was an expensive invitation. The wedding had taken place in the most luxurious hotel in the city. She picked up the phone and called. Sarah, the phone rang until it went to voicemail. Eleanor said nothing. She simply hung up. An hour later, Sarah called back. "Hi, Mom," her voice sounded tired, distant. "Sarah, you got married." Eleanor's voice was trembling. A long silence followed. Then Sarah took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom, I did. Why didn't you tell me? Mom, do we really have to do this now? Marcus and I are on our honeymoon. Why didn't you tell me, Sarah?" Eleanor's voice was rising. "Because, Mom." Sarah paused. "Because everything with you is always so complicated. We wanted a simple, quiet wedding, with only the people who are special to us. Special people." Eleanor hung up. She placed her hands on the table and stared at the invitation in front of her. 35 years earlier, her husband Robert had died. Sarah had been only 8 years old at the time. Eleanor had raised a daughter all by herself, without any help, without any guidance. She had worked 2 jobs every day, cleaning from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then working at the hospital cafeteria until 9 at night. But she had done it all for Sarah. Sarah's private school tuition, every penny Eleanor had saved for 6 years. Sarah's college education, half of Eleanor's retirement fund. Sarah's first apartment in the city, most of Robert's life insurance payout. Sarah's car, her furniture, her emergencies, everything. Eleanor had always been there. And now, she hadn't even been at her daughter's wedding. Eleanor got up and went into her bedroom. From the back of the closet, she pulled out a box. Inside were bank receipts, checks, transfers. Eleanor wasn't an accountant, but she liked to keep track. The total amount she had spent on Sarah over 38 years, $284,000. Eleanor dropped the box to the floor and sat on the edge of her bed. She didn't cry. She couldn't. She felt so empty that not even tears would come. That night she couldn't sleep. Her mind drifted into the past, to memories of Sarah's childhood. She thought of the times she had taken her to the park, the first drawing Sarah had ever made, the nights they had read books together. She lived through those moments again, tender and bittersweet. The next morning, Eleanor went to the bank. The branch manager, Mr. Harrison, had known her for years. "Mrs. White, how can I help you today?" "Mr. Harrison, I want to stop all automatic transfers to my daughter." Mr. Harrison looked at her in surprise. "But Mrs. White, these transfers have been going on regularly for 15 years. $1,200 a month. I know, please stop them. Has something happened?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "Yes, Mr. Harrison, I have been my own problem." When the transactions were completed, Eleanor walked out of the bank. Her phone started ringing. It was Sarah. She didn't answer. As she descended the bank steps, a strange heaviness pressed on her chest. The weather was sunny, but to her it felt suffocating, like a shadow. She looked at her phone again. Sarah's missed call was still there on the screen. For a moment she thought about calling back, but a voice inside whispered, "Not yet. You're not ready." She slipped the phone back into her purse and walked toward the busy streets of the city. People rushed by, laughing, staring at the glittering shop windows. To Eleanor, the world seemed to slow down. Every sound around her faded into a dull hum. The chaos inside her grew larger and larger. As she walked down the street, the smell of coffee drifted from a cafe. She stopped and looked through the glass. Young couples sat at tables, office workers typed on laptops. A memory of Robert surfaced. Years ago, they had visited a similar cafe together. They had been young then, full of dreams, believing the future was limitless. Robert had held her hand and said, "One day we'll have a daughter, and her eyes will shine like yours." The image of little Sarah appeared in her mind. Braided hair, holding crayons, happily drawing. Eleanor's heart warmed. For a moment, but then Sarah's cold words from today cut through. "You never gave me anything." Yet Eleanor had given her entire life. Eleanor didn't go inside. She kept walking. Street lamps cast long shadows on the pavement. At a corner, an old woman was selling handkerchiefs. Eleanor stopped, pulled some coins from her purse, and placed them in the woman's hand. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you," she whispered. Eleanor's eyes grew moist. She had always tried to be the one who blessed and protected Sarah. She had given up her own desires for her daughter's happiness. And now Sarah looked at her like an enemy. As Eleanor continued, she paused in front of an old bookstore. In the window, a dusty poetry book caught her eye. She stepped inside. The calm atmosphere soothed her. Walking among the shelves, she remembered how much Robert had loved reading. In the evenings, he would sit with Sarah on his lap, reading fairy tales until she fell asleep in his arms. Back then, Eleanor had thought she was the luckiest woman alive. But then Robert was gone, leaving only silence in the house. She whispered to herself, "Where did I go wrong? How did everything end up this way?" The answer never came. Eleanor wandered through the dusty shelves when suddenly she heard a voice. "Ellen, is that really you?" She turned around. It was Margaret, her old neighbor from years ago. Despite the passing time, Margaret's eyes still carried the same warmth. Eleanor smiled in surprise. "Margaret, I haven't seen you in ages." They hugged, both of them moved. Margaret noticed the shadows on Eleanor's face. "You look tired," she said gently. Eleanor tried to brush it off. "Life," she whispered, but her eyes welled with tears. Margaret took her hand. "I've always known you as strong. You still are, but I can see a heavy weight in your heart." Eleanor swallowed hard, unable to speak. She looked away toward the corner of the bookstore. She couldn't let the words escape, but simply having someone stand beside her was comforting. They chatted for a while, reminiscing. When they said goodbye and Eleanor stepped back outside, the air had cooled. The wind tousled her hair. She walked on, caught between past and present. Robert's absence, Sarah's anger, her own loneliness, they pressed down on her. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I really wasn't worthy of love." But another voice answered, "No, you gave everything. They just couldn't see it." As she reached a nearby park, she sat on a bench. Children's laughter filled the air. A memory came rushing back, bringing little Sarah here, watching her slide down the playground, feeling her tiny arms wrap around her, hearing her say, "Mom, you're the best in the world." That memory stabbed her heart. The same child now looked at her with contempt. How had things come to this? Tears streamed down her cheeks. She saw a father buy cotton candy for his daughter. The girl ran to share it with her mother. Watching them, Eleanor thought of her own mother, strict, distant. Perhaps Sarah's anger came from wounds passed down generations. She rose and walked home slowly. Outside her door stood Sarah's car. Her daughter stormed out, her face red with fury. "Mom, the bank called me. You stopped the transfers." Eleanor put down her purse and looked at Sarah. Really looked. The woman before her was no longer her little girl, but a 43-year-old lawyer, dressed in an expensive suit, with a luxury car parked outside. Yet she still demanded $1,200 every month from her mother. "Yes, I stopped them. But we have expenses." The mortgage, the car, Marcus's work. Sarah, Eleanor's voice was so calm that Sarah fell silent. You got married. You didn't tell me. You didn't invite me. And now you're here talking about expenses? Mom, you take everything personally. Personally? My own daughter's wedding isn't personal. Sarah drew a deep breath. Look, you and I. Our relationship is complicated. You always remind me of your sacrifices, of how much you gave. That's not a relationship, that's emotional debt. I didn't want to relive that drama on my wedding day. Eleanor's chest burned. But Sarah went on. Marcus was right. Not inviting you was better. Whenever you're around, everything turns into your struggles, your loneliness, your sacrifices. I didn't want to feel guilty anymore. Eleanor closed her eyes. Guilty? You felt guilty? Yes, Mom, always, because you never learned to be happy. Whatever I did, however much I gave, it was never enough. You used your sadness like a weapon. Leave, Sarah, please leave. With tears in her eyes, Sarah turned, got into her car, and drove off. The sound of the engine lingered in the silence. Eleanor stood frozen, her coffee cup trembling in her hand. It felt unreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. She walked into her empty living room. The ticking clock was the only sound. The words echoed in her head, you used your sadness like a weapon. Was that true? Had she burdened her daughter with her grief? Her mind slipped back 2 years earlier to a rainy London day when she was 22. She had met Robert outside the university library. She had dropped her books, and he had bent down to help. When their eyes met, Eleanor's heart had raced. Robert was warm, attentive, reliable. Their friendship quickly became love. She remembered his proposal, her tears of joy, their wedding day. He had whispered, "We'll grow old together," and for a while, they had. When Sarah was born, Eleanor felt she had found her true purpose. She recalled the first night she held her crying baby, the exhaustion mixed with happiness. Robert had been a devoted father. Life had been full, but responsibilities grew heavier. Robert worked long hours. Eleanor cared for Sarah mostly alone, but she didn't complain. Her daughter's smile was enough. Then Robert's sudden death shattered everything. Eleanor remembered the phone call, the suffocating grief. Sarah had been 13. In an instant, Eleanor had become both mother and father. She worked tirelessly, sacrificing her dreams and desires to give Sarah everything. And now, decades later, Sarah said she had used her sadness like a weapon. Eleanor brewed tea but couldn't drink it. She opened a drawer and pulled out Robert's old leather-bound journal. She hadn't written in it since Sarah started college. She flipped through the pages, seeing the traces of old tears. She opened a blank page and began to write. Today my daughter told me I used my sadness as a weapon. I gave her everything. I silenced my own desires. Perhaps I was sad, but it wasn't a weapon, it was survival. Where did I go wrong? Perhaps my mistake was never speaking. Tears blurred her writing, but she kept going. That evening, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Harris, knocked at the door with a plate of cookies. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, cheerful but concerned. You look pale, dear. Are you all right? Eleanor broke down. I fought with my daughter, she whispered. Mrs. Harris nodded sympathetically. Children can be hard sometimes, but I've never known a mother more devoted than you. Eleanor sobbed. But she doesn't see it that way. She called me selfish. The old woman took her hand. Sometimes people hurt the ones they trust most, because that's where they feel safe to release their anger. Maybe she isn't truly angry at you, but at her own fears. The words echoed in Eleanor's mind. Sarah's furious eyes flashed before her. Maybe Mrs. Harris was right. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Maybe Sarah had been right. Maybe she had unknowingly raised her daughter with the unspoken message, "You are my only hope." Perhaps she had turned her sacrifices into a burden without realizing it. But for the first time, Eleanor also began to question herself honestly. Maybe she wasn't just a victim. Maybe she had her own part in the wounds between them. And that realization, painful as it was, gave her strength. The next morning, sunlight filled her room. She made coffee, turned on the old radio, and Mozart's gentle notes floated through the kitchen. She opened a photo album. Sarah's first smiles, her birthday parties, her tiny handprints. Every image reminded her of the love and devotion she had poured into her child. Her sacrifices had been immense, yet Sarah hadn't seen them. Eleanor clenched her fists. "I only loved her," she whispered. "But maybe I wasn't visible enough." She remembered the years of receipts she had kept, each payment, each transfer. They were evidence of her devotion, but also of a pattern, love expressed only through sacrifice and money. Later that day, Eleanor went for a walk in the park. The crisp air cleared her mind. She ran into an old friend, Mary Collins. They talked for a while, and Eleanor admitted, "I argued with my daughter, and with myself. I feel like I've been living a role, not a life." Mary squeezed her hands. "Don't blame yourself too much. It's time you thought of your own happiness." Her words rang true. That evening, Eleanor noticed her long-unused painting table. Robert had given it to her when they married, and Sarah had once played with the brushes as a child. Eleanor dusted it off, took up a brush, and began to paint. Her hand trembled at first, but soon the colors began to flow. Blue, yellow, strokes of light and shadow. Her pain poured onto the canvas. As she painted, she remembered Sarah's small eyes, over the years harmless at first, then bigger, more calculated. She had ignored them, perhaps out of love, perhaps out of denial. Now she saw how patterns had formed, unnoticed. That realization hurt, but it also freed her. That night she wrote again in Robert's journal. "When Sarah was little, she lied sometimes. I overlooked it. Maybe I taught her that love meant turning a blind eye. Maybe I was wrong. Being selfless is not always right. I must also care for my own happiness." For the first time in years, Eleanor felt both the weight and the relief of true solitude. She promised herself she would rebuild her life. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor continued painting. Each stroke felt like therapy. The colors carried her anger, her sorrow, but also her hope. Slowly, the heavy weight inside her began to ease. She enrolled in an art class with Clara, a woman she had met in the park, a woman abandoned by her adult children. Much like Eleanor, they painted side by side, sharing their stories, laughing through their pain. But outside the peace of her art, a storm was brewing. One afternoon, Eleanor received a call. A man's voice introduced himself. "Mrs. White, I am attorney Thomas Reeves. Your daughter Sarah asked me to contact you. She has concerns." Eleanor's heart skipped. "Concerns?" "Yes, she believes you've been making unusual decisions, financially and personally. She's requesting a mental capacity evaluation." "A what?" "A psychological evaluation, ma'am, to determine if you're capable of handling your own affairs." Eleanor hung up. 2 days later, Sarah arrived at her door with a middle-aged woman in a suit. "Mom, this is Dr. Patricia Morrison. She wants to talk with you." Eleanor stepped back. "No. Mom, please. Just answer a few questions." "I am perfectly sane, Sarah. The only decision I've made is to stop funding you." Dr. Morrison intervened. "Mrs. White, no one is accusing you, but your family is concerned. Your age, your sudden financial changes. Get out. Both of you, now." Sarah pulled a folder from her bag. "Mom, these are guardianship papers. We can do this the easy way, or through court. But you're getting old, and you need someone to look after you." Eleanor stared at the papers. Her own daughter wanted legal control over her life. "Sarah," she said firmly, "you never knew me. You only saw me as a resource, money, time, effort. But you never cared about Eleanor White, the woman." "Mom, stop the drama. Go! Eleanor's scream was so sharp that both Sarah and Dr. Morrison flinched. She slammed the door. That evening, Eleanor called Margaret Chen, an old friend and a skilled attorney. Margaret had once faced a similar case herself. "Your daughter is filing for guardianship," Margaret said gravely when they met. "It's serious. But don't worry, we can fight this." "How?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. "First, we'll get full medical evaluations from independent psychiatrists and neurologists. They will confirm your mental capacity. Then we'll expose Sarah's real motive." "Money," Eleanor whispered bitterly. "That's her motive." Margaret nodded. $284,000 over 38 years. "That's a strong motive indeed." Eleanor sighed. "But I gave it all with love. She took it as entitlement. And now that you said no, she's trying to declare you incapable." That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Did Sarah really believe she was incapable? Or did she only want control over her mother's finances? She opened her laptop and checked Sarah's social media. Pictures from the honeymoon, luxury resorts, champagne, laughter. In the comments, someone had written, "Your mother must be so happy for you." Sarah's reply, "Mom is too old to come, but she was with us in spirit." A lie, a blatant lie. Eleanor stared at the screen. Something stirred deep inside her. Memories surfaced, Sarah's little lies as a child, the excuses in high school, the evasions in college. She had ignored them then, but now they all fit together. She realized she had lived only as a mother, never as Eleanor White. She had lost herself. But now she decided she would take her life back. She began writing everything in a notebook, every lie, every sacrifice, every memory. Putting it down on paper freed her from the endless cycle of replaying it in her mind. The days passed. Eleanor grew stronger. Therapy sessions with Dr. Martin helped her reclaim her sense of self. Margaret prepared legal documents. Clara remained her companion, encouraging her through painting. Finally, the court date arrived. The courtroom. Eleanor wore a grey suit Robert had once bought her. Margaret stood at her side. Across the room sat Sarah and Marcus with their attorney. Eleanor didn't look at them. Judge Catherine Brooks presided. She opened the file and spoke. "This case concerns the guardianship petition filed by Sarah White Marcus against her mother, Eleanor White. We shall proceed." Sarah's lawyer, Mr. Reeves, stood and gave a long speech about Eleanor's age, her solitude, her sudden financial decisions, her alleged paranoia. He painted her as incapable. Then Sarah took the witness stand. She wept. "My mother isn't the same anymore. She's paranoid, cuts off relationships, makes irrational choices. I just want to help her." Margaret rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Marcus, in the past year, how many times have you called your mother simply to ask how she was without requesting money?" Sarah hesitated. "I'm very busy, but please, a number." Silence. "None at all." Margaret's voice was sharp. Sarah stammered, "Our relationship is complicated. And why was your mother not invited to your wedding?" Sarah's face tensed. "We wanted a private ceremony." "Do you love your mother, Mrs. Marcus?" "Of course I do." "Then why did you only question her mental health when she stopped sending you money?" Mr. Reeves objected, but the damage was done. Finally, Eleanor took the stand. Judge Brooks looked at her with steady eyes. "Mrs. White, why did you stop the financial transfers to your daughter?" Eleanor drew a deep breath. "Because, Your Honor, I have been a mother for 38 years. A good mother. But in that time, I lost Eleanor White. I became only Sarah's mother when Sarah got married and didn't even invite me. I realized I was nothing more than her financial source." "Did that upset you?" "Yes, deeply, but it also opened my eyes. I may be old, but I am not a fool. I have the right to control my own money." Judge Brooks nodded. Then Dr. Anderson, the independent psychiatrist, testified. Mrs. White is fully competent. Her cognitive abilities are above average for her age. Her decisions are logical and healthy. The courtroom grew silent. After a recess, Judge Brooks returned with her verdict. This court finds that Eleanor White is of full mental capacity. The guardianship petition is denied. Sarah leapt to her feet. This isn't fair. She's my mother. Judge Brooks's voice was stern. If she truly is your mother, you would see her as a person, not a bank account. Furthermore, she turned to Eleanor. Mrs. White, would you like a protective order? Eleanor looked at her daughter. Sarah was crying. But Eleanor's heart no longer ached. Yes, Your Honor, I would. Judge Brooks banged her gavel. Sarah Marcus and her husband are prohibited from approaching within 200 meters of Eleanor White. Case closed. When Eleanor left the courthouse, she felt a strange lightness. The weight of 38 years had finally lifted. Rebirth. In the weeks after the trial, Eleanor slowly began to heal. She decided to leave the past behind. She returned to her art with passion. 3 months later, she held her first exhibition in a small gallery. She titled it Rebirth. Her friends came: Margaret Chen, Dr. Anderson, Mrs. Harris, Clara, and Sarah. When Eleanor saw her daughter at the door, her heart pounded. Sarah looked thinner, her eyes hollow. What do you want, Sarah? Eleanor's voice was cold. Just to talk, please. They stepped outside, into a quiet street. Mom, Sarah began, tears in her eyes. I've made so many mistakes. Marcus and I went bankrupt. We lost the house, the cars. I even lost my job because of the stress from the trial. And when everything fell apart, I realized you were always there, always, and I never saw you. Sarah, no, Mom, let me finish. I was horrible. You gave me everything, and I only took. I never gave back. I was selfish. Eleanor swallowed. Sarah, I loved you. But you were right. I did use my sadness as a weapon. I made mistakes too. Sarah shook her head. No, Mom, you were just a mother. I was the selfish one. Eleanor closed her eyes. Do you need forgiveness? Sarah nodded. Then I forgive you. But I don't want you in my life. Sarah cried out. Mom, please. I am 69. I don't know how many years I have left, but I want to live them for me. Not for you. Not for anyone. Just for me. Sarah sobbed. But you are strong, Sarah. You can stand on your own. And now you must. I will not help you anymore. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I love myself too. Eleanor turned and walked back into the gallery. Her daughter's cries followed her, Mom, please. But Eleanor did not stop. A year later, Eleanor was celebrating her 70th birthday. She had moved into a small but cozy apartment. The walls were decorated with her own paintings. Her friends were there: Clara, Margaret Chen, Mrs. Harris, women from her art class, and a man, David, a 72-year-old retired engineer she had met 3 months earlier while walking in the park. Kind, thoughtful, gentle. They had started sharing walks, art exhibits, and cups of coffee. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt the warmth of companionship. As she prepared to blow out the candles, she looked around. Her heart was full. For the first time in her life, she was genuinely happy. The doorbell rang. Eleanor opened it to see Sarah. This time, she was alone. No Marcus. Her eyes were tired, her frame thinner. But she held a small package in her hands. Mom, I know I shouldn't have come. But it's your birthday, and She handed Eleanor the package. Inside was a drawing. Sarah's drawing. It showed Eleanor and little Sarah holding hands, walking along the beach. I've been in therapy, Mom, for a year. I divorced Marcus. I live alone now. I work. I pay my debts. And every day, I think of you. Every single day. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to know I love you. And I'm sorry for everything. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Sarah's voice shook. I'm not asking to be in your life. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know. Eleanor looked at her daughter. She seemed older, worn, but in her eyes was something new honesty, maybe for the first time. Would you like to come in? Eleanor asked quietly. Just for cake. Sarah's tears spilled over. Really, but Sarah, this doesn't mean a new beginning. It only means cake. Sarah smiled weakly. That's enough, Mom. For me, that's enough. That night, as Eleanor lay in bed, she reflected. Perhaps forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Perhaps it simply meant releasing the pain. And she realized she had finally let it go. Epilogue. Eleanor and Sarah spoke occasionally after that. Not often, not with the closeness of old days. The past couldn't be erased. But Eleanor no longer carried the unbearable weight of resentment. She had accepted that some wounds never fully heal, but life could still move forward. She was still a mother, and Sarah was still her daughter. But now Eleanor was also Eleanor White, an artist, a friend, a woman who had learned to live for herself. On her 70th birthday, surrounded by her new circle of friends, Eleanor whispered a quiet truth to herself. Maybe it's late, but at least now I'm finally living for me.